The relationship between Rick James and Prince had been tense from start, marked by rivalry and strong emotions. Just before his death, at 56, Rick finally opened up about Prince, and what he said is not good. Join us as we dive into this revelation, the rise of an icon. Rick James remains one of the most memorable figures in music history because of his bold style, fearless creativity, and ability to push boundaries. His career was filled with innovation, collaborations, and a sound that helped shape funk and popular music. Though his personal life often brought attention, his career achievements and rise to fame defined him as an artist who left a lasting mark. Rick James began to explore music seriously after leaving behind his short-lived time with the U.S. Navy. His refusal to follow rules and his decision to escape to Toronto, Canada, became turning points that set him on the road to success. In Toronto, he connected with musicians who were experimenting with new styles and directions. Among them were artists like Joni Mitchell and Neil Young, who were also in the early stages of their careers. Together, they formed a group called the Mina Birds. The band's combination of soul and rock caught the attention of Motown Records, a label that was home to many legendary acts. Through Motown, Rick James began to shape his professional identity. When he introduced himself as Ricky James Matthews, Stevie Wonder suggested shortening it to Rick James, a name that would later become iconic. Stevie Wonder also encouraged him not to limit himself by the existing rules of the industry, but to develop his own sound. Rick embraced this idea and built a style that mixed funk, soul, and rock with futuristic layers, which helped him stand out from other Motown artists. His determination to be different became one of the main reasons for his success. Instead of following the traditional Motown sound, Rick James used bold rhythms, heavy bass lines, and infectious grooves that made his tracks instantly recognizable. By the late 1970s, his unique sound started gaining attention, and by the early 1980s, he became one of the most influential funk artists of his time. His performances were known for their high energy, flamboyant costumes, and an atmosphere that drew fans from all musical backgrounds. One of the most defining aspects of Rick James's career was his collaborations. His work with Tina Marie is among the most celebrated in funk and R&B history. Rick discovered her at Motown and immediately recognized her talent. Their professional relationship turned into one of the most important creative partnerships of his career. Together, they produced timeless tracks, with Fire and Desire becoming a standout classic. Their stage presence and musical chemistry were magnetic, bringing out the best in both artists. Rick pushed Tina Marie to go further with her artistry, while she challenged him with fresh ideas that fueled his creativity. Another key collaboration in Rick James's career was with Stevie Wonder, whose influence helped shape his musical path. Stevie did more than inspire him. He gave him the confidence to experiment and break away from standard industry expectations. This influence allowed Rick to merge genres in ways that created something new and exciting, a sound that would later inspire future generations of artists. Rick James's rise to fame was also marked by his ability to reinvent funk. He expanded its reach by fusing it with rock and pop elements, creating songs that appealed to wider audiences. His music stood out not only because of its rhythm, but also because of its daring lyrics and production style. Funk, in Rick's hands, became more than a genre. It became a lifestyle and a cultural statement. His image, flashy, bold, and unapologetic, matched his sound and made him a larger-than-life figure in popular culture. Throughout the late 1970s and 1980s, Rick James enjoyed a peak in his career that few artists could match. His records sold in the millions, and his concerts filled arenas. He became a symbol of energy and rebellion in music, drawing fans who admired his fearlessness. Songs like Super Freak and his collaborations with Tina Marie remain part of the soundtrack of the era. Even though his career was often surrounded by controversy, Rick James's contribution to music cannot be ignored. He introduced a style that was fresh, exciting, and unafraid to cross boundaries. His work influenced not only funk, but also hip-hop, pop, and R&B, as later artists sampled his tracks and adopted elements of his bold approach. His music still resonates because it carries the energy of a man who refused to conform. What set Rick James apart was his ability to make music that stood the test of time. His songs were built on strong beats, catchy hooks, and innovative production. He created tracks that could make people dance but also carried a certain edge that reflected his personality. This combination of fun and rebellion made his music unforgettable. As his career grew, Rick James became known as the King of Punk Funk, a title that reflected both his musical innovation and his refusal to follow traditional paths. However, Rick's life wasn't all rosy. He lived a life full of controversies, of which some even sent him to jail. But what made him act the way he did? Let's find out. The dark side of funk. Rick James remains one of the most unforgettable figures in music history, not only for his incredible contributions to funk and R&B, but also for the controversies, lawsuits, and scandals that followed him throughout his career. His rise to fame was powerful, his influence undeniable, but his personal life was marked by lawsuits, arrests, and accusations that threatened to overshadow his legacy. Understanding the darker side of Rick James' life provides a clearer picture of the man behind the music and why his story continues to capture attention decades after his death. In 2020, long after Rick James had passed away, his estate was sued for $50 million by a woman who alleged that he assaulted her in 1979. According to her claims, the incident happened at a group home for troubled youth in Buffalo, New York. At the time, she was only 15 years old and part of the Youth Detention Center program. She stated that Rick James was acquainted with the house parents who supervised the residents. One evening that spring, Rick reportedly visited the home and entered the dining room where the young female residents had just finished dinner. Most of the girls were excited to meet him, but the accuser, unfamiliar with him and uneasy about his behavior, retreated to her bedroom. While she lay face down on her bed, reading, she alleged that Rick James entered her room, forced himself onto her, and threatened her into silence. According to her affidavit, the incident left her with years of emotional trauma, including depression, substance misuse, panic attacks, and flashbacks. Although the lawsuit brought renewed attention to Rick James' troubled past, it was ultimately dismissed. Still, it added to the long list of allegations and legal troubles that surrounded him both during and after his career. Long before stardom, Rick James was already exposed to a world that shaped his personality and lifestyle. His mother worked as a dancer for the famed Katherine Dunham and also earned money as a numbers runner. This meant that James grew up surrounded by both artistic influences and the rougher side of urban life. He had the opportunity to watch performances by artists like Miles Davis and Etta James, but at the same time, he saw the risks of living close to crime and addiction. His rebellious streak appeared early. In his autobiography, Glow, Rick James revealed that he had his first romantic experience at just 9 or 10 years old with a 14-year-old neighborhood girl. He often linked this early introduction to intimacy with the themes that would dominate his music later in life. From an early age, he developed a fascination with romance, rebellion, and pleasure, all of which became central to his identity as an artist. Before becoming a solo star, Rick James performed with Neil Young in a band called the Mina Birds. This group gave him his first exposure to the music industry, but it was only the beginning. His energy and flamboyance eventually helped him stand out as a solo act, but alongside his rise came struggles with substances and an increasingly reckless lifestyle. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, Rick James had established himself as one of Motown's most successful acts. His music combined funk, soul, and rock, producing hits like Super Freak, which became a career-defining track. His concerts were wild, his outfits extravagant, and his persona unforgettable. But behind the music, his personal life spiraled into chaos. Rick James's substance use began in his teens, starting with marijuana and heroin before eventually moving to cocaine. By the late 1960s, cocaine had become a constant in his life. He later admitted to spending up to $7,000 per week on the substance during the height of his addiction, maintaining this pace for about 5 years. His studio sessions were often accompanied by substances, alcohol, and endless partying. He recalled that recording sessions would not begin without cocaine and champagne present, showing just how deeply substances were woven into his daily life. The consequences of this lifestyle caught up with him. In April 1984, he was hospitalized after being found unconscious in his home. By the 1990s, his health was declining rapidly. He underwent hip replacement surgery after years of high-energy performances left him with serious joint damage. In 1998, he suffered a stroke while performing at Mile High Stadium in Denver, caused by a ruptured blood vessel in his neck. These health issues were made worse by decades of substance misuse. Even at the time of his death in 2004, traces of cocaine were found in his system, along with 9 other substances. Though he had claimed to have quit cocaine during his prison years, the substance remained a presence in his life until the end. Rick James's legal troubles began making headlines in the early 1990s when his substance misuse and violent behavior escalated. On August 2, 1991, he and his girlfriend Tanya Hijazi were arrested for holding 24-year-old Frances Alley hostage. According to reports, she was tied up for several days, forced into romantic acts, and burned with the hot end of a cocaine pipe during a substance binge. James was charged with assault, taking her again, her wish, torture, and other serious crimes. If convicted on all counts, he faced life in prison. While out on bail for that case, Rick James was involved in another assault. On November 3, 1992, he and Hijazi allegedly attacked music executive Mary Sauger during a meeting at the St. James Club in West Hollywood. Sauger claimed she was kidnapped and beaten over a 20-hour period. Rick James was eventually found guilty of both crimes, although he was cleared of the torture charge that could have kept him in prison for life. In 1994, while serving his sentence at Folsom Prison, he lost a civil suit to Sauger, who was awarded nearly $2 million in damages. James himself was ordered to pay her $1 million, while the hotel and a security company were ordered to pay the rest due to negligence. After serving more than 2 years, Rick James was released from prison in 1996. He described receiving support during his sentence, but his freedom did not end his troubles. In 1998, he was accused again of intimately assaulting a 26-year-old woman, though those charges were eventually dropped. Rick James's reckless behavior extended beyond the courtroom. Stories of him nearly setting himself on fire during crack binges became part of his wild legend. In one infamous incident, he accidentally set his robe ablaze after trying to light leftover crack residue on a plate. His dealer had to smother the flames with a bedspread, while James brushed off the near disaster as if nothing had happened. These episodes showed how far addiction had taken him from reality, even as he maintained his superstar persona on stage. So, what was his relationship with Prince, and why the hate? Rick James and Prince, sparks of funk and rivalry. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Rick James was already becoming a household name in funk and soul. His explosive energy on stage, wild fashion, and unforgettable songs were pushing him into superstardom. Around the same time, a younger artist named Prince was beginning to make his way into the music industry. Their paths were bound to cross, and when they did, it created one of the most talked about relationships in music history. Rick James first heard about Prince through promoters who told him that the young musician admired his style and sound. Flattered by the news, Rick decided to give Prince a chance to tour with him. Prince was still new and had only just started to build his reputation. To Rick, it felt good to help someone who might be following in his footsteps. But from the very beginning, things did not flow smoothly. Rick noticed that Prince never came up to introduce himself or even say thank you for the opportunity. That small detail stayed with Rick, who valued respect and recognition, especially from newcomers. When Rick saw Prince's first performance on the tour, he wasn't impressed. Prince moved very little, barely engaged with the crowd, and ended the show by taking off his trench coat and standing in his revealing outfit. The reaction was not great. The audience booed, and Rick felt embarrassed for him. Yet, as the tour went on, Rick noticed something unusual. Prince began watching him closely from backstage. Soon after, Rick realized Prince was copying many of his signature moves. The way Rick flipped his microphone, the way he cued the crowd by holding his hand to his ear, all of these gestures started to appear in Prince's act. At first, Rick was irritated. He decided to confront Prince and asked him to stop stealing his style and to tell his band to be less rude toward others. Prince seemed to agree, but Rick never felt his words were taken seriously. The uneasy relationship between the two grew. Rick, who was outspoken, made it clear in interviews that he felt Prince was taking ideas from him without giving credit. He didn't hide his feelings from the public, and soon fans and the press began to notice the tension. What could have been a mentorship slowly turned into the beginning of a rivalry. But it wasn't all about stolen stage moves. Prince and Rick were both powerful performers, and their similarities created natural comparisons. Both loved flashy clothes, both had strong romantic themes in their music, and both had a magnetic energy that drew crowds. To Rick, it felt like Prince was stepping into his lane without acknowledging the influence. To Prince, the silence might have been his way of staying focused, but to Rick, it looked like disrespect. The competition heated further when personal interactions came into play. At one point, Rick threw a birthday party and chose not to invite Prince. Prince, bold as ever, showed up anyway with his band. Rick didn't take kindly to the uninvited arrival. He later claimed that he grabbed Prince by the hair and forced him to drink cognac, which left Prince upset and humiliated. It was one of many moments that added fuel to the fire between them. By the time the early 1980s rolled around, their relationship had shifted from distant tension to open conflict. What started as an opportunity for a young musician to learn from a more experienced star quickly turned into one of the most memorable rivalries in funk and pop music. What Rick James really felt about Prince. As the years went by, the quiet competition between Rick James and Prince transformed into a full rivalry. Both men were rising quickly in the music world. Rick James had found success with his groundbreaking funk sound, and Prince was beginning to capture attention with his unique blend of funk, pop, and rock. The press loved to compare the two, and Rick hated being placed in the same sentence as Prince. One story that stands out happened at the 1982 Music Awards. Rick's mother, who loved collecting autographs, asked Prince for his signature. Instead of agreeing, Prince turned his back and walked away. For Rick, this was unforgivable. Not only did he feel insulted for his mother's sake, but it also deepened the frustration he already carried. Even though Prince later apologized and gave her the autograph, Rick remained furious. For him, it was not just about paper and ink. It was about respect. The rivalry wasn't limited to award shows. Ideas for musical projects also became a battleground. Rick had spoken about his plan to form a female group called the Mary Jane Girls, who would carry his style and vision into a new era. To his shock, Prince launched his own girl group, Vanity 6, and even recruited Vanity, a singer Rick had originally wanted for his band. To Rick, this felt like betrayal. Prince had not only taken his concept, but also poached the woman who was supposed to lead it. Still, Rick refused to let the setback crush his dreams. He went ahead with the Mary Jane Girls, and they achieved success with their sultry image and catchy tracks. Their popularity even lasted longer than Vanity 6. However, the competition left a permanent mark on the relationship between the two men. Every time people suggested that Rick had copied Prince, he strongly defended himself, making it clear that his ideas had come first. Their rivalry even spilled over into the lives of others. Actor and comedian Eddie Murphy, who wanted to try his hand at music, first approached Prince for help after releasing his novelty track, Boogie in Your Butt. Working with Prince, however, didn't feel comfortable for Eddie. That's when Rick James stepped in. Excited at the chance to both help Eddie and prove himself against Prince, Rick wrote Party All the Time. The song became a huge hit, reaching number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and holding that spot for 3 weeks. Ironically, the track outperformed Rick's own solo singles and gave him bragging rights against Prince. Public insults only made the rivalry worse. Rick often called Prince names in interviews, questioning his mental stability and mocking his music. He was particularly irritated by people saying he was following in Prince's footsteps. For Rick, this was the ultimate insult. He believed his sound and vision had come long before Prince's success and wanted the world to know that he was not copying anyone. Prince, for his part, rarely responded directly. His silence, however, only made Rick more frustrated. Instead of putting the feud to rest, Prince's quiet confidence added to the mystery, and fans kept speculating. Both artists had their own loyal followers, and the tension became part of their legend. So when Rick passed away, did Prince respond or give any form of tribute? The final chapter and the silent tribute. As Rick James entered the later years of his career, his life was very different from the wild energy that once made him a star. He had already given the world unforgettable hits and had cemented his place in music history. But the fast lifestyle he once embraced began to take a toll on his health. Years of struggles with substances and a turbulent personal life left him weaker, though his spirit remained bold. He wanted to keep making music, but his body could not always keep up with his heart's desire. Despite his troubles, Rick James never fully stepped away from music. Even when his health declined, he stayed connected to the industry. Fans continued to celebrate his earlier work, and younger artists often looked to him for inspiration. His songs were sampled, his image remembered, and his impact never faded. This showed that even as the man himself slowed down, the legend of Rick James kept moving forward. During these final years, he faced many health challenges. He suffered from strokes, heart issues, and the physical effects of years of strain. Yet, he carried on with a level of resilience that reminded people of the same fire he had shown in his music. Though he was not always able to perform as he once had, his name continued to command respect. Many of his peers admired him for his courage, even when life was not easy. In August 2004, the world received the news that Rick James had passed away at the age of 56. He was found at his home in Los Angeles. The official reports showed that multiple health problems contributed to his death, and his past substance use also played a role. It was a moment that shocked the music community, even though people knew he had struggled with his health for years. Fans around the world mourned the loss of a man who had shaped funk and soul in unforgettable ways. His funeral brought together friends, family, and fellow musicians who came to pay their respects. It was clear that despite his troubles, Rick James had left behind a legacy that could not be erased. His music had touched people across generations, and his bold personality had made him a figure who was impossible to ignore. When it came to Prince, their relationship had always been complicated. After Rick James's death, Prince did not give a public tribute in the traditional sense. He was known for keeping his feelings private, and this was no exception. Still, the connection between them was undeniable. Prince's continued work in funk and soul was, in its own way, a silent acknowledgement of Rick James's influence. Even without spoken words, the link between the two remained strong. Rick James had helped set the stage for artists like Prince, and Prince carried that torch forward in his own genius way. Their shared history in music made Rick's passing feel like the end of an era. Fans often saw the two as part of the same wave of creativity that reshaped modern music. Rick James's final years and his death left a bittersweet mark. His struggles were clear, but so was his talent. He lived loudly, created fearlessly, and influenced deeply. Even in silence, Prince and others like him carried parts of Rick's fire into the future. That ensured that Rick James would never be forgotten, not just as a man, but as a legend who gave funk its wild, unforgettable heartbeat. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.